Oh dang, the new episodes of Invincible are out. Time to get So the first of the new set of brand new episodes of Invincible Season 2 have finally come out on Amazon Prime, and I am so excited to talk about them. Obviously, I didn't talk about episode 4, so I'm going to cover it in a little bit of detail here today, but let's not worry about that right now. If you enjoy this video and any of my other content, then consider dropping a sub. We're trying to hit 900 subs before March is over. I know it's a big scary number, but I think we can do it. And if you want to show that little bit of extra support, consider becoming a channel member. You get all sorts of cool rewards like member-only emotes, exclusive Discord channels to talk in, a little badge next to your name that shows just how cool you are, and a bunch of other really cool perks like early video access. So consider becoming a channel member if you want to show that little bit of extra support. Thanks, everyone. But with all the self-promotion and business out of the way, let's finally talk about Invincible. Since I didn't do a video on episode 4 when it came out, let's talk about episode 4 for a little bit. I'm not going to cover absolutely everything, I'm just going to cover the things that really stood out to me and that seemed like the most important point of the episode. That being, Mark goes to space, like interstellar space, and goes to a planet full of bug people. And who does he find there but his dad, Omni-Man? As you can imagine, Mark has very mixed feelings and very conflicting emotions when he finds him there. And said confliction only gets worse when Nolan presents Mark with his little baby brother, his new baby brother. Mark is so over dealing with his father that he is ready to just fly all the way back home by himself with no assistance. And obviously he'd never make it, but goddamn, I mean, I have a little bit of sympathy for Omni-Man because he does seem to have grown as a character since season 1, but like, goddamn, Mark is kind of in the right here. The bug people inhabiting this planet are called the Thraxans, and they have a unique biology that essentially they only can live for about like a 1 human year, so time is a very like foreign concept, or not a foreign concept, but they look at it in a very different respect as to how we would. And Omni-Man is basically like, Mark, I know you're upset with me, I know you're angry with me, but I really need to protect my baby brother since the Viltrumites are inevitably going to come for me. This is where we really see Mark's sort of moral high ground shine through, because like, even though he really doesn't want to, he does it anyway, because like, yeah, his little brother is innocent, but it's, all the conflict of like his mere existence is just like, it must be a lot to digest. So Mark at all agreeing to help in any capacity is just like shows how good of a person he is. And when the Viltrumites inevitably come, Mark obviously gets his ass beat because he's never fought another Viltrumite aside from his father. And his father is pretty much, they're trying to kill you. You need to stop fighting like you're fighting on Earth. You need to fight like a Viltrumite. And that's kind of the big takeaway from this episode. Fight like a Viltrumite. And Mark gets his footing, and he actually does kind of beat the crap out of some of the other Viltrumites that are coming to attack them. But inevitably, they lose out, unfortunately. Omni-Man gets abducted by the Viltrumites and is essentially sentenced to immediate death because of A, abandoning his post, and B, crossbreeding with a species that is considered weak in the eyes of the Viltrum Empire. And as Mark is laying on the ground with a hole in his body and just bleeding out, one of the Viltrumite commanders, who I think is voiced by Clancy Brown, is like, alright, it's your job to get Earth ready for the invasion now. Don't fail us, or they all die. So one can imagine just how much pressure, fear, and anxiety Mark is left with after this battle. Obviously, plenty more happens in episode 4 that I haven't discussed here yet, but I feel by this point, anyone who's watching this video has probably seen the rest of episode 4, so let's move on. But the new episode that came out just yesterday, at least for American audiences, man, this was a banger episode. The episode opens with Mark still on the Thraxan world, and we do a little bit of a time jump between the battle and 2 months later, and Mark had actually stayed on the Thraxan world mainly because he was stuck and, they needed to get his ship ready for him, but he stayed also because he genuinely wanted to help rebuild from all the destruction his father's mere presence left behind. And in those 2 months, Mark seems to have, really grown to, actually sort of care for his little brother because, at some point, Mark is going to be all he has because his mom is going to die very soon because, well, she's a Thraxan. She's going to die in a year. Even though Mark came home with a new little brother who has absolutely zero relation to Debbie at all, Debbie still, agrees to look after him for a little bit just while they find a more, permanent and longevity solution. So, by that logic, Debbie is taking care of a child who is her ex-husband's new baby. And she's still doing it anyway because she sees how much Mark cares. Debbie, without a doubt, gets Mom of the Year award from me. No questions asked. And after his 2-month absence, seeing Mark just like catch up with people, like Cecil especially, the scene where he catches up with Cecil was really intense. Especially since Cecil was, listening the whole time, because of course he keeps close tab on Debbie and Mark, of course. And seeing Mark catch up with Amber was a big one. As soon as he, opened the door and started talking to Amber in their college dorm, he was immediately talking about some of the stuff that happened. And then he looks behind Amber and sees that she has some friends over, and then he sort of spins it into a different narrative as to not blow his cover. I thought that was like a really like little funny scene. Like, yeah, it's serious, but like the way they played it out was like really clever, and I enjoyed it. Amber has been a lot more tolerable in season 2. Like, I've enjoyed her character a lot more. Like, she's been a lot more supportive of Mark. And, he's been doing his best, but man was trapped in space for 2 months. And that created quite the gap in the relationship, both literally and metaphorically. But the rift in their relationship gets even bigger as Mark has to go back to space almost immediately later in the episode. So, goddamn, I don't see this one lasting much longer, quite frankly. One character I really, really enjoyed this episode was Rexplode, of all people. Rex is on his king shit this episode. I mean, not only is he on his king shit in terms of fighting, but he's on his king shit in terms of improving as an individual and, like, being a decent human being. And that was really nice to see. The scene especially where Rex, quote-unquote, sneaks into Eve's room to ask for help with a mission was really good, because Eve is pretty much just like questioning her powers, like if she should even keep using them after that, thing with the park collapse in one of the previous episodes. And Rex pretty much cheers her up and remotivates her and is like, hey, everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human, and all we can do is learn and do better. And it's like, damn, hearing that from Rex of all people, like that really shows how much his character is growing. And I think that's really highlighted in the fact that Eve thanks Rex for his words. And man, hearing someone who was cheated on thank the person who cheated on them, that's a big step for both of their characters. And I really enjoyed that scene. Honestly, that was probably the highlight of the episode for me. And Rex isn't just on his king shit in terms of being a literal sweetheart this episode. He's on his king shit in terms of fighting, too. The Lizard League infiltrated this, like, nuclear control bunker where a bunch of, like, nuclear warheads are controlled, and Shrink Ray, Duplicate, and Rex are all sent to deal with them. And they have some, like, decent success at first. Shrink Ray takes out one of them by going inside his eyeball and just completely crushing his brain, I guess. But then it gets a little bit desperate. Duplicate gets absolutely clapped. It was pretty damn gruesome, and I was like, oh, damn. I wish I had my live reaction recorded, because I was like, holy moly, that was actually pretty damn brutal. And then Shrink Ray tries to pull the same trick again on one of the bigger Lizard League goons, and she gets inside of him, and then she tries to grow back to normal size, but he's just like, nah, I'm just gonna eat you. And her fate is yet to be determined. And then it's just Rex against the big guy and this claw lady. And Rex not only blows the little claw freak in half, but blows up the big one's head, though at the price of his hand. Must have served him well, if you catch my drift. There's no other way to put it. Rex was on his king shit in this episode, and he was honestly one of my favorite parts of this episode. You can just tell that the Rexplode in Season 1 and the Rexplode in Season 2 are two completely different people. Obviously, Rex still has plenty of his lazy tendencies, but you can tell that as an individual and moral-wise, at least a little bit, he's improved, and that's, like, really cool to see. Speaking of improvements, though, let's talk about Donald a little bit. Donald finally just, like, loses his temper and is like, okay, Cecil, you're gonna tell me what the hell you did to me and why the hell I can't remember certain things. And he's pretty much, why am I a cyborg? So Donald wasn't completely atomized in Season 1. Nolan's body shielded him from part of the blast, and they found Donald's brain intact. The rest of him, though, was atomized. So they made him like a cyborg robotic body and brought him back, and they didn't want to tell him because, as Cecil puts it, PTSD is a bitch, and I couldn't agree more. And as they're in the room and Donald is, like, spiraling pretty much with his existential crisis, they get into an argument, and they just keep, like, fighting and yelling at each other. And then there's this really funny scene where the door opens, and there's this, like, I don't know, assistant lady there, I guess, and she's like, sirs? And then they both turn to her at the same time and go, what? Like there's some bickering old married couple. I know the scene was very serious, but I couldn't help but laugh my ass off when they did that. The finale of the episode ends with Mark, Eve, and the Guardians heading up to a Martian spacecraft full of those sequid things that have like a hive mind host type of deal. And it's finally revealed that Shapesmith, the Martian in disguise, is actually the reason behind all of this, because he was the one who knocked out the human astronaut and left him stranded on Mars. I get the guy wants to see the stars and like help people, but man, that is not the way to do it. Anyways, they head into space, their ship gets blown up, Eve saves them, because she's the best, and they finally make it onto the ship. There are millions of sequids above the spacecraft, and Bulletproof is like, hey, I'm gonna punch and kill one. And then he attracts the entire hive mind to their attention. So good job, Bulletproof. Claps to you, my friend, for being the hero of this episode. They get overrun really fast, but luckily Robot is there to save the day, as he was able to sort of like interrupt their like neural communications, I guess. The pulse was kind of weak and it didn't give them much leverage, but Rudy gets out of his suit after Eve conjures a shield and is like, I can make a bigger version of that pulse by using parts from my suit, but yeah, he needs 5 minutes, and Eve was not able to hold it for 5 minutes, which, of course, not her fault. The sequids are pretty much swarming them, just like millions of them just pushing against her shield. Of course she couldn't hold it for 5 minutes. And it ends on this big cliffhanger with Rex dealing with the lizards and having a gun to the back of his head, and he's like, do it, you son of a bitch. And all the Guardians, Mark and Eve, getting overrun by sequids with their fate to be determined in the next episode. Man, that is one hell of a cliffhanger. The fight was also, like, really entertaining. I haven't really mentioned this, but all the action in this episode, really good. Really good. There pretty much wasn't a moment in this episode where I wasn't entertained by any of the action or, like, drama going on between the characters. It was just an overall just fantastic episode. And the post-credit scene is even more interesting. We find our favorite boy, Alan the alien, waking up from his life support, I guess. And he's bigger and buffer than ever. And we find out that, like, Grandmaster guy of the Coalition is actually a Viltrumite, but he's not there to, like, hurt or kill anyone. He's actually rebelling against the Empire, the very first to ever rebel against the Empire. So that was a pretty interesting turn of events. And apparently the reason he turned off Alan's life support is because he wanted Alan to sort of fend for himself, because it would either make him stronger or he would just die. So he gambled with Alan's life, and he does say that he's like actually really sorry about that, but he felt it was the best choice. Definitely a Viltrumite level choice, but still, it paid off, so I can't fault him too hard. I think the show did a very good job of making us think that this Grandmaster guy was actually the traitor, but wow. The reveal, like, really, like, I was not expecting that in the slightest. Obviously, I haven't read the comics, so I'm sure that was the thing highlighted in the comics, but the show itself on its own did a very good job of making the audience think that this guy was the traitor. Overall, there wasn't a moment in this episode that I didn't enjoy. Every single second counted, and every single second was well spent by the creators. So major claps to everyone who worked on Season 2, and especially this episode, because this one was an absolute banger. 10 out of 10 from me. And that was Invincible Season 2, Episode 5, and I guess Episode 4 too, technically. I hope you all enjoyed hearing my thoughts and just general reactions to what happened in these episodes. And please, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you all think. Do some back and forth talking about, you know, what the future of the show might hold, what the next episode, like what might happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And again, if you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a sub. We're trying to hit 900 subs before March is over. Again, I know, very big scary number, but I know we can do it. I'm going to be trying to put out some smaller videos during the week for anybody who like doesn't care for reviews, or, you know, anybody on my channel who just isn't interested in Invincible during the week. That way you have some other content from me. But Sundays are going to be dedicated to Invincible videos, at least until the season is finished. So I hope that's a good enough compromise. But that's going to do it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.